Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to a special edition of the Black Creek Oyster Bay Service Committee for Monday, May 15th, 2023. And I guess the first thing to do is to take a moment and recognize the fact that we are doing our business today on the traditional unceded territory of the Comox First Nations. We have one big agenda item today, and that is the Black Creek Oyster Bay Water Master Plan. If I could get a motion for receipt. No, it's not working. Okay, thank you. And over to, this isn't really set up. I thought it was on the button part.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm pleased to introduce Chris LaRose, our Senior Manager of Water and Wastewater Services. And Chris, I'm not sure if you got a PowerPoint to walk us through, but you'll introduce this staff report.
Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, James, and good afternoon, everyone, through the chair. Yeah, so I do have a brief PowerPoint presentation here I'll bring up. Just bear with me. Great. Yeah, so the report on the agenda introduces the long-awaited water master plan for the Black Creek Oyster Bay water system. The planning process was started back in 21. So we're coming up in 2 years since initiation. And the key drivers for the planning process were to better understand what we have, where the system is going, and what improvements are needed to satisfy growth, to ensure to ensure that we have the information we need when we're negotiating with developers about adding significant demand to the system. And it's intended to complement the asset management planning work that's been done for this service and others. So asset management is about ensuring we know when infrastructure needs to be replaced due to condition and risk. And then water master planning is more about capacity. So how are we doing right now in terms of meeting capacity? What improvements are required in the future to allow us to continue to meet system requirements with growth. So, bear with me. There we go. So there's a number of key focus areas for the planning process. The first is understanding or ensuring that we have a good understanding of what our current demand is for the system and what it's likely to be due to population growth and projections in the area. Second of all, so assessing the capacity of our water supply system, so our groundwater and river infiltration gallery wells. And next is understanding the capacity of our distribution system, which includes the pipes in the ground and the reservoirs where we store water for distribution during peak times and for fire flows throughout the system. And then next is fire flows themselves. Assessing how we compare currently to recommended fire flows for the various types of developments within our service area, and where we need to get to and how. And then I'll just touch on some key recommendations. Obviously, this is a very, very big technical document, so I'm really just going to be providing a high-level overview today, but definitely happy to get into the details on any other items that you want to hear from me on. So for demand projections, one of the key metrics that systems can be compared, a parameter that systems can be compared, is with respect to non-revenue water. So this was a key metric that came out of the Union Bay Water Master Plan. And for that system, I think that we had seen upwards of 40% non-revenue water. And this is water that is being treated, but not making it to a metered connection. So at 23%, The Black Creek Oyster Bay system is right around where you would expect a system of this age. So not doing too badly. Looking forward into the future, we modeled an additional 792 connections. So that's from a combination of existing vacant properties that could be developed, properties that are subdividable under the existing zoning, and then for active and proposed developments. And then one of the key takeaways here is that further reducing our per capita demand for the service obviously will help capacity go further and help to minimize our impact on the river system. So water supply capacity is a very hot topic for this system, given we are a year and a half into a new or upsized connection suspension, and that's because of uncertainty over supply capacity. Looking at some of our drier years over the last 6 or 7, there has been a feeling that we've been, exposed to a level of risk in terms of being able to meet the peak demand during those dry and hot periods of the summer, which has spurred the development of first well number 5, which was completed in 21, and now well number 7, which is well underway for completion this fall. And so the planning process looked at a number of different conservative scenarios to understand, if we have a very dry year and one of our sources is not accessible for one reason or another, can we still meet demand for the service? I just chose one of the scenarios here, one of the most conservative ones, which we've carried forward for the rest of the analysis, which just highlights that without until we have that additional well, which is again slated for completion this fall, we will be in a bit of a deficit situation in that on a good year, no problem meeting demand, but if events conspire to see very high level of drought conditions, equating to high demand in combination with the loss of one of our sources, we could be in a sticky situation. So it supports the ongoing connection suspension until that new well is completed in the fall. Then we looked at water distribution system capacity. And one of the key takeaways from the report is that approximately 2.5 kilometers of new water mains are recommended to help manage growth and improve operations for the system. So that on the next slide, I'll show a map pulled out from the document that just highlights where those are recommended. It recommends or concludes that reservoirs are a little bit undersized for the mix of sectors that we have within our system, particularly for those areas with IC&I, industrial, commercial, institutional, and that they recommend that a reservoir optimization study is necessary to confirm the timing and scope of those upgrades. And then just a note that the single largest proposed development within the system is the Saratoga Beach Estates, with the potential for 446 connections. And then there's the second would be the potential Watuco conversion with about 220 effective connections. And this map is pulled out of the document. As I can see now, it's not very easy to read, but it's the service area a little bit turned on its side north, up that way. You can see the blue lines are the sections of the water mains that they're recommending be upsized to meet fire flows. We have some commercial operations that are kind of at the north and southern extremities of the system that are driving the recommendation for upsizing those mains. But none of the fire flow, I'll touch on this on the subsequent slide, none of the fire flow recommendations are And they're not suggesting that we preemptively replace or upsize mains just on the basis of fire flows, but that when we do, because of condition of that infrastructure, that they be upsized to provide those recommended levels of fire flows. And not very easy to see it all are the green highlighted areas which tie to that 2.5 kilometers worth of improvements that are required from a kind of today capacity perspective. So some of those are completions of loops to allow for water supply to come from two different directions, and then some other upsizing, some undersized mains. So fire flows are just generally speaking for a water system, they do generally drive the size of pipes and the size of reservoirs. Other than during a main break, those are without question that by far the highest periods of highest demand is when a fire is happening and hydrants are opened, potentially even more than one fire at once. So this process involved modeling of various fire location and time of year scenarios. Obviously, the worst case being where fire occurs during a period of highest demand from the public. So in those scenarios, is there enough, and how long would it take the system to recover from, if the reservoirs are drained as a result of a fire scenario, how long does it take them to recover and therefore have the capacity to allow the system to respond to another event. So they're recommending about 12 kilometers of water main, which is about 33% or 1/3 of the total length of water mains, be upgraded as replacements occur. So again, not preemptively, not replacing it with the sole purpose of upsizing fire, but only when replacements are otherwise scheduled. And then there is the potential as we navigate the follow-up study work to this process, and then even as we come to our first update for the water master planning process in about 5 years from now, to revisit the desired kind of level of service from a fire flow perspective. These recommendations have come about based on meeting the recommendations from the fire underwriters survey. They're not requirements, they are recommendations. And given the relatively few number of commercial developments and operations within the service area, there may be some potential to adjust the desired levels of downwards, the desired levels of fire flows to help reduce the total cost implications to the service participants. And before I end here, just a couple of key conclusions or recommendations coming out of the planning process. So one, very importantly, they did conclude that the installation of the new well at the Shelter Point farm will resolve at least the near-term supply of of water supply and license capacity concerns. And that with the prospect of the 2 additional wells on that same land, that we should be able to build out capacity with those wells, which is excellent news. They are recommending further fire analysis to confirm the upsizing recommendations, just given the scale. Undertaking that reservoir optimization study to make sure we understand the scope and timing of any reservoir upgrades. And recommending that we implement the water distribution capacity recommendations once we've pending the outcome of that further fire flow analysis. And then finally, developing and implementing a water conservation plan to help reduce that per capita consumption within the service area. So next steps, we will work internally and also with the help of external advisors to action the recommendations. We'll combine the outcome of this work with the asset management work already done for the service to develop a comprehensive capital plan for the service. We'll be meeting with the Saratoga Beach Estates to convey the outcome from this work. and then confirm the necessary upgrades that are needed to facilitate that development. And then finally undertake a development cost charge study to, and then bring forward recommendations or a recommended amendment to that bylaw. That's it for me, but I'm happy to answer any questions about the water master plan.
Thanks, Chris. And Director John.
Thank you for the report. Very helpful. I've got quite a few questions, concerns. So first item is relates to First Nations. In all fairness, a lot of water is coming from Strathcona Regional District. So I don't see any mention of First Nations from our regional district being included. And yet I think they should be. So that was the first thing that I was concerned about. Go ahead.
Oh, sure. So the water master planning process was a topic on the monthly meetings that the CVRD have with the KFN. So the KFN are aware of the planning process, and we've committed to bring them, provide access to the report once finalized. But no, we didn't do any First Nations consultation beyond the KFN for this particular planning process.
That's all fine and dandy, but what about the Lac-Wood Wash people? I think they should be included also.
Okay. Thanks for that, Director. The CVRD has undertaken some limited work with respect to our Strathcona Waste Management Service and the Lac-Wooltac and other nations in more in the Campbell River area and north of the Oyster River. So we can look to that work and then look to further the discussion specific to water. So can try to understand how that consultation might go, what options might be available for us as we look to this master plan and implement different pieces of it.
I still have lots more questions here. The report mentions 2 additional wells. Whereabouts would those be located?
So the new well under development is intended to be the first of 3 wells built on that same property. So these are immediately adjacent to the existing treatment plant. It's a large farm field. So we negotiated with the property owner over the last several years, and then we're able to secure a statutory right-of-way and covenant that provide for those 3 well sites, first of which is under development.
Director, if you've got more questions, just leave your button alone and we'll just let you ask Chris what you need to, through the chair, of course.
And I noticed that the report didn't have too much mentioned about Area D, because I mean, over the years, we haven't done a lot of development there, but that interest is starting to pick up at this point in time. So I'm wondering, will there be capacity should Area D start doing something?
Yeah, so I think you've noted, so I think the assumptions in the planning process are that limited development level in Area D would continue. So we did, we worked, checked in a number of times with staff from the SRD to understand what, if any, projected growth in that area. We were directed to kind of assume kind of historical averages in terms of growth. So if that doesn't turn out to be the case and that there is more development, we'll be continuously running our model. So I don't have a definitive answer for you now, but our sense is that there's definitely room for growth on the existing kind of trunk line heading north from the system, but that we definitely have to run our model to understand how much.
See, the challenge that we have right now, I think why SRD staff couldn't give too much information is that we're just in the process now. We're going to go out very quickly to update our very old OCP. So that is going to open up the door for possibilities. And I know that, the inquiries that I get that are independent of SRD staff, there is a lot of interest to pick up and start doing things, particularly on the south end. So I just wanting to make sure that there's good capacity for that. The other question that I had was that you mentioned in the report 12 kilometers of water mains to get replaced. What is the ETA on that approximately?
So that 12 is the total length of mains that they're recommending be upsized when they are replaced. So not imminent. So that for those 12 kilometers, when they are due for replacement due to age, condition, risk, at that time we will upsize them to provide the fire flows, but we won't be replacing them preemptively.
And what is the anticipated funding for that?
They're far enough out. We haven't considered that.
Okay.
Yeah. So the 2.5 kilometers are, as far as the water master plan, they're recommending that they be considered and put into the capital plan now. Those other 12, we would have to review the asset inventory and understand, when those are projected to be replaced based on their age and condition now to understand when. But we're looking at likely the 15 to 25 year horizon for those replacements.
Perfect.
Yeah.
The last question, the report mentions 792 potential new connections. Are those all south of the Oyster River?
So there are some. So that's a combination of vacant properties. So there will be some of those that are north of the Oyster, and then so vacant properties, those that are subdividable under current zoning. So again, that would apply to SRD. And then the third category would be the existing or proposed developments. So that's likely just in the area C component, given the feedback we had from the SRD staff. But the first two categories would cover properties north and south.
Okay. And I'm just looking at my list here. I did have one more question. It's mentioned in the report that additional capacity might need to be negotiated on the water licenses. I'm wondering if you could just expand on that a bit.
I don't recall those exact words, but so our existing license capacity covers all the existing sources. So the 3 groundwater wells and the 2 river infiltration. So our assumption has been that we won't be getting any more license capacity for those wells. So what they have in common is hydraulic connectivity to the river. So obviously the river wells are in the river, but the 3 nearby groundwater wells are so close to the river that they are considered part of the river. So any water we take out of there could be assumed to be taking out of the river. So our assumption is that we're not going to be getting any more capacity that impacts the river, just given how stressed that river is in terms of licenses and fish. So that was one of the drivers to develop this new well field, is it's far enough away from the river that it has no impact on water in the river. So that's our focus, is on getting the new wells licensed separately. So that's a groundwater license, not a surface water license. Yeah, for sure.
Thank you very much, Director, for those good questions. Speaking of the 792 additional connections, does that also include carriage houses and secondary suites? Or are carriage houses are generally hooked up to the same connection as the major property, or do they have their own?
Yeah, there's definitely some. We've assumed that. Well, I guess it's more. So there's properties that are zoned for secondary dwellings, which we would assume would typically involve a second connection. And then there are those that would have a carriage house or a secondary suite inside the primary dwelling, in which case we'd assume no additional connection. So the 792 includes some properties where that are currently zoned for a secondary dwelling, which could translate to additional connections.
But Doesn't any property in the Comox Valley Regional District automatically, if I think, is it half a hectare or whatever, if they're bigger than that, they're automatically allowed a secondary dwelling, or and does that hold true for Strathcona Regional District as well? Do they have the same? I don't know if they have the same bylaws we do regarding automatic secondary. I mean, before the province brings in their quadruplex thing, but just wondering, do they have the same options north of the Oyster?
To be honest, I don't, I'm not sure. I can definitely find out the answer though.
So, I mean, it's exceptional if you, in the Comox Valley, to not be able to have a secondary dwelling, correct?
Well, and again, I'm not totally confident in this answer, but my understanding was that it was the secondary dwellings are only allowed for the significantly larger properties. But again, I can confirm that.
Yeah, I think we'd have to get back to you just to be certain on the on which lots are able to have that secondary dwelling or carriage house, or we can get that back for you.
Yeah, because I know that's one of the things we pride ourselves in for the regional district is that you're allowed secondary dwellings. You don't have to apply for a special zoning. What's the other piece? So yeah, you answered the 12-kilometer replacement thing, and the fire flows for ICI. Is that just the around the Highway 19A there? That's the only light industrial / commercial area in this water system, isn't it?
Yeah,
pretty much.
The majority of it would be on that 19A corridor, although I believe there is some along the water in the America Beach area as well. Yeah.
And also mentioned the reservoir upgrades. I guess it would depend on how it all pans out in the next couple of years, right? So,
yeah. So
where would you anticipate those reservoirs to go?
So, so no anticipation of a new reservoir site. It would be more likely either a twinning or additional height on an existing reservoir site. So they didn't undertake it wasn't within the scope to do the analysis required to tell us exactly how much more capacity is required, but nothing is indicating that we would be doing it, looking at anything other than potentially just raising the height of a reservoir, adding a little bit more capacity at those existing sites over time.
I think Director Rice has another question. Director?
Just to put some clarity to secondary suites in Area D. Currently, we don't permit it, but that is something that will be changing. There's very few zoning that would allow that in Area D. And typically what is happening at this point in time with our existing bylaws is that if there is, for example, a home that has a legal suite, they're actually billed twice for water unless they're on a meter. So we have a lot of work to do with that, and hopefully we can get things moved around. One question that I did come to mind is the water conservation plan. Is that going to tie in with the water review rate for that was coming up?
The rate review?
Yep.
I know I don't see. We weren't anticipating a connection between those two pieces of work.
Well, there was supposed to be a water rate review coming up because there was some concerns that were mentioned probably about a month ago.
Yeah.
Over rates, and particularly when it comes to water conservation concerns by a lot of area residents where, currently they're allotted 15 cubic meters of water per month, but many, especially smaller households are not using that.
Yeah.
So again, those are things that could play quite well into a conservation plan.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree that connection that you just made there. That will definitely be part of the rate review. So just reassessing the kind of how the revenue is currently structured. So that flat rate plays an important piece of the revenue pie for the service, right? And then how much we will certainly reassess kind of how many cubic meters are included in that flat rate as part of that assessment. If a review turns out, concludes that, that we are potentially, that there is an opportunity for tightening up the number of cubic meters within that flat rate, we can certainly look at that. So that would definitely be part of the rate review.
Okay.
The water conservation plan would be more focused on, what can we do as the organization, as the service to help to spur decrease in per capita consumption. So there's a little bit of overlap there, but not enough to have us drive those two together at the same time.
And I'm just wondering, is there any education piece to that, to the public?
Absolutely, for both of those initiatives, without question. Yeah. So the rate review, we have a information session. We plan to do an information session in the fall after we've completed the work. So very, very important to ensure that we bring the public along in that process. And then water conservation planning, that I definitely foresee that similarly we'll be meeting with the public on that.
Thank you.
I'm just looking at the some of the monthly demands, and they're actually getting better overall. I do have a question though, around leaks, and do we have any idea of the health of the system overall, and in how much water we are losing into the gravel every year?
Well, that metric that I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, so that 23%, that's the kind of the relevant metric there. So so leaks fall largely within that amount. It is somewhat proportional to the age / condition of a system. So that puts us, at roughly what's average for a Vancouver Island community with a distribution system of this age, versus a system like Union Bay, which is quite a bit older. A lot of the pipes are quite a bit older. They're seeing non-revenue water up to the 40% level, which is higher than average. So for this system, we are roughly where we would expect to be in terms of amount of unaccounted water / leaks. Yeah. So I think a water conservation plan, that would be another aspect to that planning process, is examining and looking for ways to improve our leak detection program for the service and try and bring that number down.
Thanks a lot. Director, have more questions? I think that's the ones I kind of highlighted. Thanks for bringing up the consultation piece with our Northern First Nation neighbors. That's definitely important. I always tread lightly on that. I do think that there's a lot of stuff in play. We don't really know about Watuco. It's still up in the air. I know that the Saratoga Beach Estates are asking when they're going to get their go ahead on this. They've been hoping for a breakthrough. So I guess we'll find out what's going on from planning on that one. So we don't have the right crew here right now. So other than that, those are two big question marks. The rest of it is sort of just business as usual. North of and south of the Oyster River. Interesting, though, your OCP is finally going to be overhauled into the 21st century. And Director, you got another question?
Getting ready to move recommendations.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm done blathering here then. So let's vote on receipt. All in favor of receipt? And Director, you want to move the recommendation?
Move recommendation.
Second. Any further discussion on the recommendation? Seeing none, call the question on that. All those Opposed? Didn't recommend it that one. Okay, so none opposed, and it carries unanimously. I think that brings us to the end of our afternoon matinee here on a Monday at the Comox Valley Regional District, and out there in Cyberland. I hope you all get outside and get some of that vitamin D we've been lacking all winter. So, a motion to adjourn?